Okay. All right, so I'm in the special chair.
Okay, I'm gonna get you lean ahead
Okay.
and just,
Okay, and what's this device do?
this is what we call a pneumograph, and it
Okay.
measures your breathing cycles.
Okay. So one around the chest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Normally, we don't mention breathing to people because as soon as I tell people breathe normally,
Mm-hmm.
and they become aware of it, then it's hard to breathe normally because you're thinking, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is to measure blood pressure, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do we have in here?
These are just gel pads, like they would,
Oh, okay. That's for the palms?
yes, just for the one,
Oh, just one?
yeah.
Okay. And you're measuring
What
skin temperature?
Measuring electrodermal activity,
Okay.
which is basically a fancy way of saying sweating.
Sweating,
It's a
okay.
little more complicated than that, but that's
Right.
basically what it is.
So you put both of them on?
Yeah, one on
Oh.
here. Outside.
Okay.
Okay, and then just turn that one over and let it hang over the end.
That's not gonna fall off, is it?
No.
Okay.
No,
All right. It
So-
will come off, right?
It will come off.
In a week or two?
it'll come off. Just, they're a little difficult.
Oh,
They
okay.
do come off.
It's okay. I don't have any hair on my palms, so
No.
I won't pull any hair off.
Fair enough. So during the test, it's important that you try to sit as still as possible. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to sit up straight in the chair with your
Yeah.
back right into it and your feet flat on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to look straight ahead during the test.
Okay.
And once I start the test, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes.
Oh, okay.
Okay? I'll be asking the questions from over here, obviously, and you're going to hear me clicking the mouse and using the keyboard. Don't worry about that. That's normal.
Okay.
What I'm doing is keeping things tracking and making adjustments as I go along.
Okay.
Or marking things on the charts themselves.
Okay.
Most important thing is that you do your best to sit as still as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
First thing you're going to notice out of the ordinary is I'm going to start to inflate the cuff. So you'll know that very shortly after that I'll be starting the test. So
Okay.
get yourself, make any last minute adjustments to get yourself comfortable when you feel that and so on. Once I get the cuff inflated to where I want it, I'm going to reach over and massage it a little bit to get rid of any air that's trapped.
Oh, okay.
And then very shortly after that, we'll start the test. And the first
Okay.
thing you'll hear me say is, please remain still. The test is about to begin.
Okay.
There'll be a bit of a pause, and I'll ask the first question.
Mm-hmm.
You'll answer very simply, yes or no.
Okay.
There'll be another pause, second question.
Mm-hmm.
You'll answer yes or no.
Okay.
Another pause, another question, and so on.
Okay.
Once I've asked all of the questions, I'll say to you, this test is over. Please remain still. I want you to remain still until I let the air out of the cuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can kind of adjust yourself to get comfortable again.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Is there a limit on the number of questions? Sometimes I have clients that have a list of 15 questions, and I
Yes.
explain it doesn't work that way. So can you just kind of explain how the questions are worded and why we don't have a list of 20 questions?
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we do the test?
Yeah.
We'll get that out of the way.
Okay.
And then I'll answer that for you.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna do what we call the acquaintance test. And I do the
Okay.
acquaintance test for two reasons. First of all, like I say, I want you to get used to being attached to the polygraph and to answer the questions simply yes or no. For my part, I wanna see what it looks like when you tell the truth and how your physiology responds when you tell a lie as well. So I'm going to ask you 7 questions on this test.
Okay.
You're going to be telling the truth to 6 of them,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll be lying to 1.
Okay.
And again, I want to see how your physiology responds each time.
Okay. Is this like what you call a baseline? Like establishing a baseline?
Yeah, if I have everything set up right, and if you're a good responder,
Mm-hmm.
I should have no problem seeing a big difference in your responses.
Okay.
So, the way I'm going to do it is very simply this. I've got a paper here, and it's got some numbers on it, and one of the numbers is missing. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to write in the missing number for me.
Okay.
Good. So on this test,
Mhm.
I'm going to ask you, regarding the number you wrote, did you write the number 1? And you'll answer,
No.
did you write number 2?
No.
Did you write 3?
No.
Did you write 4?
Yes.
Did you write 5?
No.
6?
No.
7?
No.
Perfect. The only difference, when we do this on the actual test, when I ask, did you write number 4, I'm going to ask you to deliberately lie to me. So when I ask, did you write number 4, you're going to answer
No.
Perfect. In other words, you're going to be answering no every time, even when I ask number 4.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Any problems?
No.
Okay.
Sounds straightforward.
Please remain still. The test is about to begin. Regarding the number you wrote, did you write the number 1?
No.
Did you write the number 2?
No.
Did you write the number 3?
No.
Did you write the number 4?
No.
Did you write the number 5?
No.
Did you write the number 6?
No.
Did you write the number 7?
No.
This test is over. Please remain still. Okay.
Oh, I was starting to hurt a bit.
There's
So how was that?
okay. There's good response at number 4. And I'll show you what other things that we have that I look for when I do
Okay.
that test. So, first thing when I go to number 4 right here,
There's a lot of lines on this screen.
okay, so I asked the number 4 here,
Mm-hmm.
your blood pressure goes up and then levels out. And it stays pretty much level for the rest of it until number 7. There's some response there as well, but it's not all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get much response on this one. That's the one on your hand.
Mm-hmm.
I get response here. I'm happy with what I see there. Here's what I mentioned to you. Okay, here's a deep breath here.
Mm-hmm. I took a couple of deep ones.
Yes, you
Yeah.
did there, and then at number 6.
Yeah.
Okay, what happens is when you take the deep breath, it pulls this up and it pulls this up artificially.
Okay.
Same thing here,
Right.
pulls your blood pressure up and you know, pulls this up as well.
Interesting.
So
it's better to not.
So you're
Like I do that as
normally,
I it's almost a habit. Like was when I'm in sessions and I'm sitting for an hour.
Yeah.
You get tensed up sometimes with the
Right.
stories, right? And so I've almost trained myself to just go like every few minutes.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll try not to do that, but
All right.
that's the only reason
That's-
I'm doing it.
that's what normally
It like relaxes
yeah.
me a bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's basically what the first test is all about. It's basically just to get you used to being attached.
Mm-hmm.
It shows me any problems, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss them with you, you know, before we get into the actual testing.
Right.
So that would be the next step, is to go over the questions with you that I'm going to ask you on the test.
Okay.
And get that test ready. So
Okay.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the test itself before we get going.
Sure.
When I do this test, one of two things can happen. The person can pass the test or they can fail the test. When someone fails the test, it's for one of two reasons. Either they aren't paying attention and following my instructions, or they're not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important that you listen to what I have to say to you during this part of the test.
Okay.
On this part of the test, I'm going to ask you 3 different kinds of questions. I'm going to compare your responses to those questions to determine whether you're telling the truth or not. I'm going to ask you questions that I know you're going to tell the truth to. For example, I'm going to ask you, is your first name Paul?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you, do you live in Canada?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to ask you, are you presently in Ontario?
Right.
I want to make sure that you trust me. Normally when at some point during the test I tell you that I'm only going to ask you questions that I go over word for word. There won't be any trick questions or surprise questions or anything like that on the test.
Mm-hmm.
I probably during an actual test I probably said that 2 or 3 times. So one of the questions I'm going to ask you is whether or not you trust me when I say that. So I'm going to ask you, do you believe I'll only ask you the questions that we've reviewed?
And that would be a yes, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, normally it would.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the actual, the next questions that I want to review with you are the actual relevant questions, the questions that we're here to find the answer to.
Right.
So I'm going to go over those with you. And the first question will be, since the summer of 2005, have you engaged in any bottom line behaviors? And I'm going to ask you to read the card from the top down, please, and read it aloud.
Pornography use.
No, the entire card, including the question.
Okay. Since the summer of 2005, have you engaged in any bottom line behaviors? Pornography, except for teaching purposes. I would say research
Okay, for research?
teaching and research
Okay.
purposes. Yeah,
Then we'll include that in there.
right. Basically not using it in a sexual way, like
Right.
because of the teaching I do, I've had to go on sites to do screenshots and see
Right.
video clips and pictures and stuff, but I don't use it for myself
No.
for sexual purposes.
No.
Masturbation, lying about my sexual behavior or keeping secrets, I guess, is a live omission, same thing, right?
Yes,
Inappropriate contact with others.
okay.
Yeah.
And knowing now that I'll be testing you on these issues, is there anything you need to identify or disclose before I run this test?
No, just what I said about the
Okay.
pornography part,
And-
yeah.
I think what we'll do is change pornography to let's put for sexual stimulation.
Mm.
Does that make more sense?
Using pornography for sexual stimulation. Yeah,
That's better?
I think so.
Okay.
Mhm.
So now the reason I go over all these questions just like this is to make sure that there's not going to be one of these things that, ooh, you know, the wording of that is going to bother me, blah, blah, blah. So let's change it at this point.
Right,
So in each of them, it'll be pornography for sexual stimulation.
right.
And that's more my fault in the way I should have basically had it that way before.
Right. Yeah, I'm just trying to, and I was thinking about what's the best way to word that, you know, because it was, the old behavior was pornography and usually accompanied with masturbation. So
Yes.
it's using porn for personal sexual gratification, let's say, right?
Yes, so the next question will be this one. And
Okay.
again, I'll get you to read it aloud.
Since the summer of 2005, have you maintained your bottom lines? 1. Pornography used for sexual stimulation, masturbation, lying about your sexual behavior, inappropriate contact with others.
Okay, and knowing now that I'll be testing you on these issues, is there anything that you need to identify or disclose before I run the test?
No.
And how will you answer that question?
This question,
Yes.
have you maintained your bottom lines? Yes. The
Yes.
answer would be yes.
Okay, and the first one you'd answer no. And then this is the third question. Since the summer of 2005, have you violated any of your bottom line behaviors?
Since the summer of 2005, have you violated any of your bottom line behaviors? Pornography used for sexual stimulation, masturbation, lying about your sexual behavior, inappropriate contact with others, and the answer would be no.
Okay, and again, knowing now that I'll be testing you on these issues, is there anything you need to identify or disclose before I run the test?
No.
Okay, and what word will you use to answer that question?
Have you violated? No.
Okay. The next three questions that I want to talk about are what we call diagnostic questions.
Okay.
And these are questions about things that everyone has done at some point during their life. For example, if I were to ask you, have you ever hurt someone? Most people would say yes. And I'm sure you'd answer.
Have you ever
the same
hurt
way.
someone?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you the question, have you ever hurt someone that you cared about?
Yes.
Okay, what I'm going to ask you to do, I want you to think of some specific incident where you've done that. Don't tell me about it, I don't want to know. Just let me know when you have some specific time when you've hurt someone you care about.
Okay.
Okay, when I ask that question on the exam, what I want you to do is think about that thing and then answer no. And
Oh,
just like the number 4 on the first test.
okay.
And I expect I'm gonna see a deceptive response on my charts, because you've told me there's something there. So don't forget, follow my instructions and answer no every time, okay? The next diagnostic question deals with lying to a family member. So I'm gonna again ask you to think of some specific time when you've done that. Don't tell me about it, I don't wanna know, but just let me know when you have something specific there.
Yeah.
Okay, once again, when I ask that question on the exam, I want you to think of that thing and answer no.
No.
And
Okay.
again, I expect I'm gonna see a deceptive
Right.
response.
This is like the number 4 response.
Yes.
Okay.
And the last diagnostic question deals with doing something that you later regretted.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'll get you to think of something. When you have something specific there, let me know.
Okay.
Once again, I'm going to ask you to think about that thing and then answer no.
Okay.
The way you'll hear these questions will be like this. During your entire life, do you remember ever hurting someone you cared about? And you're going to answer
No.
okay. And during your entire life, do you remember ever lying?
No.
Got these in, okay, there, just lying to a family member.
No.
And the last one will be during your entire life, do you remember ever doing something you later regretted?
No.
Okay, those are all the questions I'm going to ask you on the test. There won't be any others. I'm going to ask them in a random order, but those will be all the questions. Any problem with any of those questions?
No.
Okay, you ready to go?
Sure.
Good. Now, I should tell you ahead of time, I normally ask these questions more than once. I normally ask each of the questions, I usually run between 3 and 5 charts for each set of questions, depending on how easy things are to read.
Okay.
So we'll start the first one now. I just don't want you worrying when I end this, thinking, well, why is he doing another one? Is there something wrong? No.
No, that's fine.
It's normal to do more than one. In fact, it's a requirement to do more than one. So he's getting worse
Yeah.
instead of better. I think I'm gonna go and get another knee support and get a better one today.
Maybe a brace or something to help you.
I've got one of the little elastic ones, but
Yeah.
it's
They
not
only do
doing
so
much.
much. Yeah.
Okay. Please remain still. The test is about to begin. Do you believe I'll only ask you the questions that we've reviewed?
Yes.
Forgot to review the next one, but
Okay. Can I scratch my head too?
sure.
Okay.
Regarding your sobriety, do you intend to answer truthfully each question about that?
Yes.
Is your first name Paul?
Yes.
During your entire life, do you remember ever hurting someone you cared about?
No.
Since the summer of 2005, have you engaged in any bottom line behaviors?
No.
Do you live in Canada?
Yes.
During your entire life, do you remember ever lying to a family member?
No.
Since the summer of 2005, have you maintained your bottom lines?
Yes.
Are you presently in Ontario?
Yes.
During your entire life, do you remember ever doing something you later regretted?
No.
Since the summer of 2005, have you violated any of your bottom line behaviors?
No.
This test is over. Please remain still. So what the computer says when it scores them is that there are no significant reactions.
Okay.
Okay, this is a p-value. If you know anything about statistics, it's 0.040.
That this result was produced by a deceptive person. Okay. So is that ever 0?
No, the lowest I've ever seen is 0.001.
Okay.
But that's still, and the same, this analysis says the same thing.
94.946 per p-value.
And what it's saying is that the middle question, the one that you answered yes to, gave you more problems than the other two.
Oh, okay.
Now, having said all that,
What was that middle question?
the one that you answered yes to, whether you'd maintained them, have you maintained your bottom. I don't know why, it just happens from time to time.
Okay.
The bottom line is the three questions are all basically the same.
The
They're all
same,
looking
yeah.
at the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we can total the scores to come up with our conclusion. If it's three different issues, then you go on each separate one.
Okay.
So looking at this, the third question of the relevant, of the diagnostic questions was the one that gave you the most problem.
Which one was that?
I'll have to look.
Where you, have you ever lied to anybody? Like the one where I'm answering no to?
Yeah, the ones you answered no to were
Okay. Yeah, have you heard anyone, if you lied, did you do something you regret?
1, 3, and 4. That's always good to look at. Now, I don't normally go on the computer scoring.
Oh, okay.
I score them myself. And
Oh.
I'll tell you why. You made a number of deep breaths through the test.
Yeah, I tried not to, but
There were some times when you pumped your arm. So what I,
It was falling asleep on me.
yeah,
I'm just
What
trying to.
what the computer does is it scores everything. It doesn't
Yeah.
know that those things happen, so
Right.
it just scores everything. Where if I score them, I'm gonna look at each of those areas and see, can I score them or not? Can I score part of them, or should I just ignore the whole thing? And when I do that, it's gonna depend on where during the question you know, that thing happened and so on. So we can do that if you want.
Oh,
It's
okay.
probably not gonna change anything, so it's no significant reactions to the relevant questions, which is truthful.
Okay.
Um,
So I passed basically.
oh yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Please.
The
please
technique I used
explain
today-
about how you determine the number of questions. Yeah.
the technique I use today is what they call the Utah test, developed by the University of Utah.
Okay.
It has had more research on it than any of the other techniques to show that it does work.
Okay.
And so that's why I use it. It's limited to 3 relevant questions, and the best use of that test is what we call a single issue test, like we did today. So with polygraph, with any test, the simpler you can keep it, the better. So I try to stick to a single issue test. Now,
Oh,
that's all right.
No,
not to
just
worry.
your we need to.
So when someone comes to me and says, I have 15 questions or 12 questions that I need the answer to, I tell them I can't help you.
Right.
But what I ask them to do is send me a list of your 12 questions. And there's a lot of commonality sometimes.
Yeah, they're often the same
And
question,
a lot of
reworded,
times-
right?
Yeah, a lot of times I can boil it down and say, okay, here's what I can do for you.
Okay.
So when we talk specifically about addiction, I like to keep my tests simple to one of the 2 tests. Either test them on their disclosure,
Right.
and or a maintenance test like we did today. Test them
Right.
on their sobriety.
Right.
That way I can avoid actually using the words in the question. So,
Like words like sex,
Like
oral
sex,
sex,
oral
cheating,
sex,
affairs.
cheating, yes.
Okay.
because again, a lot of times they're strong, that in itself can bring on a response.
Mm-hmm.
So the simpler I can keep the test, the better. Now, so here's what I normally will do. Normally, you refer someone to me, and it's normally it's partner that calls me.
Is it?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would say,
Well, they're too scared. The guy's too scared,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah.
I'd say 90% of the time. So I like to talk to both the wife and the husband beforehand.
Yeah. And I encourage them to both talk to you as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
And what I say to the wife is, I use an analogy with them, and the same analogy every time. I tell them, listen, I'm going to ask you, if I asked you, tell me about the last 10 things you bought on your credit card, you'd probably be able to come up with 8 of them fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You're really going to struggle to get the last 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I were to pick one of those 8 and say to you, you sure this was on your credit card? Could it have been on your debit card?
Mm.
Then again, you're going to start questioning yourself, and you may have some confusion over which one it was. And
Right.
these are all things that happened within the last couple of weeks at most.
Yeah. Not years ago or
Yeah,
anything.
and we're
Yeah.
asking your husband to go back sometimes 20 years or more to
Yeah.
remember every detail of what
Yeah.
he did.
Yeah.
It's an impossibility, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't expect when he comes in here, and I tell him the same thing, I don't
Mhm.
expect you to remember every single detail. That's not what this is all about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on anybody's side here.
Yeah.
And I tell him the same thing. My goal here is to find out whether you've done your best.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what my questions are going to.
Mm-hmm.
Have you made an honest effort to make a full and complete disclosure? And the more important question is, are you deliberately holding something back that you know you should have shared with her?
Right.
And if you can answer those two questions, you should have no problem with the polygraph.
Right.
So I like to talk to both of them. I like to put his mind at ease. I like to let her know ahead of time, here's what I'm capable of, what I can do and what I can't do.
Right.
So, and I tell them, in my mind, the main thing we want to find out here is, did he do a good job on his disclosure?
Right.
And those questions that you have should have been asked during their disclosure. Normally they're asked right in the disclosure and he's answered them. And that's part of his disclosure. So most of your questions should have been answered there.
Right.
So what I tell them is, yeah, sometimes there is one or two burning questions that you know you just have to have a little more reassurance on. And so if there is, you know, think about it over the next few days and send me an email, tell me what they are. And a lot of times they'll say no, most times they'll say no, I just want to make sure he's good on the disclosure.
Yeah.
Sometimes they will come out with a couple of questions. So what I'll do in that case, and I'll tell them, this is the most important issue, the disclosure. So I'm going to do the test on the disclosure first, and then I will do a secondary test. And I'll ask 2 or 3 questions on that secondary test. I don't charge any more for doing that, but I prefer to stick to the you know, the
just focus on the disclosure. Yeah.
Because when you get into the secondary ones, now you are starting to have to introduce some of those keywords. And most of the time, it's not going to make any difference, but there is that issue that it could.
So with most of the clients that I refer to, they've already done the disclosure with me, but how about clients that just find you online or something and they haven't done that, or they're not working with a therapist? Do you tell them to just do a disclosure, or go see a therapist to do a disclosure?
I normally ask them, is this a sexual addiction test? And if they say yes, I'll say, okay, before I do any testing, I like to have the person do complete disclosure. And has he done that yet? Well, no. All right. And what I tell them is, you know, I don't like testing before you do that. And I tell them why. Tell them because invariably what happens is I do the test, person's not telling the truth because they're not, it's the wife's the driving force. She's the one normally that wants it. And I don't want to jump the gun here. I don't like doing them until you've done a disclosure, because invariably you're going to pay me for the test, and then you're going to be back here paying me again, because invariably I'm going to find out that there's more to this. And if they insist, well, and they give me a reason, then sometimes I will do them. Well, if they tell me, well, we just really can't afford a therapist, say, well, okay, I'll do it, but you may be wasting your money. So going back to your original question, there are a number of polygraph formats. Most of them are limited to two or three questions. There are some that will accommodate 4. I've never used them. Because I'm not familiar with them. And they're not, I haven't used them because I don't like the look of them. I don't like the way they're structured.
So you only use 3 at the most?
Well, I've used a number of different tests, but I like to stick to the ones that work for that situation. So if I do, what happens when I do a polygraph is, and you can attest to this today, after 3 charts, your arm's bothering you.
Yeah, it got pretty sore.
You've had enough.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I've been sitting here not moving for half an hour at least.
If I have to go to 5 charts, because there's a lot of movement, or there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, then I'm probably not going to get any more than that one issue looked after. So if I do a backup test, and especially if there's only 2 questions, which I like to keep it to over and above the thing, then I can use what they call a screening test. I only run 1 chart with it.
Oh, okay.
But I ask each of the relevant questions 3 times.
Okay.
Same thing, but I ask them all into 1 chart instead of spreading them over 3.
Okay.
It's a good test. It hasn't had as much research done on it as what the Utah test has, but it's the one that I use with the RCMP.
Right.
And it works fairly well. And I'll use it, like I say, as a backup if there are more questions after the first test. I don't like to use it as my, go-to initial test.
Okay. And you always ask in the format of like the truth, like you get me to lie, then you ask the question that we're trying to measure, then a lie, then the question. Is that how you always do it?
In every format that there is, it's always lie,
truth,
and
truth.
truth.
Yeah.
Well,
or hopefully truth.
Okay.
Right?
Well, it's say diagnostic or control. Same thing.
Like my name is Paul is the control.
That's an irrelevant question.
Okay, so the control question is, have you ever regretted anything
during your entire life?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever?
Say no, and that's like diagnostic. Okay.
So it's always diagnostic relevant.
Oh, okay.
Okay, in Utah.
Okay.
In the screening test, because you're fitting more in, it's diagnostic, relevant, diagnostic, relevant, diagnostic, relevant, and diagnostic.
Okay.
So you've asked each of the relevance 3 times.
Okay.
And you keep switching either side. So in that one, you compare there's a control on each side of the 2 relevance.
Right.
So diagnostic on each side of the 2 relevance.
Right.
When you score this relevant, you can score it to either one of these 2 controls.
Right.
Okay, or diagnostics. Same thing with the other one, either one. So you pick which one of these is strongest, and you use it for your comparison for both of them.
And what's the purpose of the irrelevant then? Like, I'm in Ontario or I'm in Canada.
The irrelevant question is to break up the pairs, and to give you a rest between them, so that you finish that pair. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of rest before I go to the next one.
So nice easy question. I don't have to think about it, and just before the next one. Okay.
Yeah.
Just filler basically.
Yeah.
Right?
And the other one is the question, are you afraid I'll ask you a question we didn't review? Or do you trust me when I say I won't ask you a question we didn't review? That's the reason behind that is to tap off any outside issue that might. So let's say you're testing someone on a theft, and 2 weeks ago he robbed a bank, and he comes in, he's so worried about, you're going to find out about the bank robbery, that his entire attention's focused on, geez, I hope he doesn't ask me about the bank robbery.
Okay.
So you want to assure him, I'm not going to ask you any questions except the ones that we go over word for word.
Oh, okay.
And, so that secret's safe with you to try and get him to relax and kind of put that out of his mind.
Right.
And concentrate on the issues that you're testing.
Okay.
So all of the questions, every one of them has a reason.
Yeah, there's nothing random
There's
in this
nothing,
thing. Yeah.
and some people say, well, can't you the 10 questions on the test or 11, can't you substitute one of those other ones? Because I've got 4 questions I need asked. No, every one of them has a purpose.
Right.
A reason for being where it is.
Okay.
So the main thing is yeah, I can do those 2 tests, and I can accommodate a couple of extra questions, but I don't like going much beyond that, because a lot of times a lot of the questions they want are things like, I want to know if he really loves me. Well, how do you
I was going to ask you that.
I just say I don't ask that question. I
Yeah.
tell them.
So it's not
Because
something that is measurable in
It's
this
too
sense,
subjective.
right? Too subjective, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How about he had an affair and she wants to know, do you love her?
Yeah.
Same thing?
Same thing.
Okay, too subjective.
Too subjective.
Right.
And if I say to her, okay, write down what you mean by love,
Right.
and I ask him the same thing.
Yeah.
She may say, well, if he loves me, he's true to me. He doesn't want anybody else. He doesn't, want this, that, the other thing. Well, he may think, well, you know what? I love her, but I love this other person too. But I do love her. And if you ask him, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
His definition may be worlds apart from what hers are.
Right.
So if I ask him, he can answer yes, and it's still not going to give her the information that she really wants.
Right. Yeah. So it's basically behaviors that we're measuring, not feelings that we're measuring, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that's the other thing. It doesn't always tell you the truth. It tells you what that person believes the truth to be.
Yeah, and I'm just curious if because I've said, and I this is just based on kind of an assumption, I suppose, but unless you're a stone cold sociopath that believes your own lies, you can't fool one of these things. So is that accurate, do you think? Is it possible that someone really believes their own lie to that point, or?
No, I don't think it is.
Oh, okay.
There's only one study that I know of that's been done on sociopaths, and it was done by the guys from Utah.
Oh, okay.
And it was done in Vancouver.
Interesting.
And they found that they actually respond better than the normal population.
Really?
Yeah. Because they know that society thinks it's wrong.
Right.
And they fear being detected.
Right.
So, and I've heard that in policing so many times that you'll never get a confession from so-and-so because he's a psychopath or a sociopath. I've had lots of confessions from people that like that, and what you have to do is convince them they're caught.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's no other way out.
You can't really say it and have the statement go in, but basically what you're trying to indicate by words is, you're going to go to jail. It's just a matter for how long.
Right.
And then they think, okay, I don't feel any remorse, but I know society expects it.
Right.
So
it might be better for me.
It would be better
if
for
I
me
just
if
admit it, or
if I admit it,
right.
and so they will. I mean, they will confess, but you have to just make them know that they're going to jail. It's just a matter for how long.
Right. Interesting.